fortunate at the Space Foundation that we get to work with one of the many amazing astronauts that worked to keep Hubble in service. And that is our very own Duane Carey, who's been working with us for quite some time on one of our platforms we call Audience with an Astronaut. And so he's going to share some really, really cool stories with us tonight about Hubble and some of the things that it means to him here on the 30th anniversary. So Digger, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, Ron. Good to quote unquote see you again. I'd rather work with you in person, but we do the best we can, right?
So we got to do the air fist bump.
Yeah.
Bam!
How about we just imagine that I'm on Earth and you're on the space station and we're doing this?
Oh, we can flip it? Well, maybe someday I'll get to do that. Ron Digger's calling. All right, sounds good.
I thought you were in space. I mean, you got a big window behind you, right, with space in the background there?
Well, thank you for the lead-in. The image that you all see behind me is actually the image that they released this morning of, I believe they call it the Cosmic Reef for the Hubble 30th anniversary. So that's my picture tonight in my background. So I'm just I'm floating in the newest discoveries of the nebula that they shared with us today.
There you go.
So let's start off with the big question that I'm sure that you always get: what inspired you to become an astronaut?
You know, every time I get that question, I kind of forget what answer I gave last time. But really, it boiled down to as a young teenager, I guess probably 12 or 13 or something like that. I got interested in reading science fiction, you know, good science fiction, classic science fiction, and I became enamored with the idea of space exploration and perhaps someday being part of the team that is, you know, helping mankind open up the universe. And as the years went on, because I was a military pilot in the Air Force and eventually I became a test pilot, it became clear that if I was going to get involved in the space program, it would be in the role of a pilot. So I think I first started falling in love, I guess, with the idea of space and space exploration when I was probably 13 or 14 years old. And for the audience out there, Ron and I have done a lot of work together, and in a way, he and I are kindred spirits because we're both space geeks, and not every astronaut is a space geek. You might think we all are, but you know, a lot of us are there because we're very technically adept and we think it's an important, challenging job. There's a few of us that are space geeks, and so is Ron. Right, Ron?
Absolutely. It's hard not to be, I think, and it's because of people like you and what you've done for space and really for education that we're allowed to be space nerds and see some of the amazing images like the one behind me. So let's dive right into it. You know, as an astronaut, you got to fly the 4th mission to space to be able to service the Hubble Space Telescope. So tell us a little bit about how that all came about, you know, and really what you were there to do, because it's a pretty important mission, especially when there's a little piece of it that's kind of important to us looking out in the deep space.
Sure. The Hubble, as many of the audience out there know, the Hubble is the only unclassified satellite that was actually designed to be upgraded throughout its orbital lifetime by humans on spacewalks. And I say unclassified, not that I'm hiding any secrets or anything like that, but I mean, you know, with my level of security clearances and stuff like that, I guess I can't definitively say that no other satellite's ever been worked on by human beings while it's in space, but the Hubble is the one that was designed to be upgraded that way. And it was designed, you know, with the space shuttle in mind, so that they knew that there'd be periodic trips to space to service the Hubble Space Telescope. Now, Ron, when I flew on my mission, STS-109, in early 2002, the Hubble was on its 2nd set of solar arrays. And solar panels, as many of us know, they tend to degrade over time. And the solar panels that the Hubble had on there, the 2nd generation, the 2nd set of solar panels that it had had since it was launched, they were actually starting to degrade in terms of efficiency. So our mission was going to involve 5 spacewalks, and the first 2 of those were going to be to replace the solar panels. And then after that, on the 3rd one, there was an electronic box inside the Hubble that we call the power control unit, This is essentially for the electronics geeks out there. This is essentially a gigantic relay box. It's kind of like the electronic heart of the telescope. And one interesting thing about this piece of gear was it had never been designed to be removed while the Hubble was in space. So it didn't have all the special features that made it accessible to astronauts wearing, these thick gloves that they wear when they have their spacesuits on. So that was kind of a touchy operation there to take that piece of gear out and put the new one back in. And then on the fourth one, our spacewalkers removed the faint object camera, which had been in place inside the Hubble ever since it launched, back in 1990, and replaced it with the advanced camera for surveys, which is still up there and it's working very well. They actually did some repairs on the advanced camera for surveys, or the ACS. They did some repairs on that during the 2009 final servicing mission to the Hubble Space Telescope. And then, Ron, on the fifth spacewalk of this particular mission, the job was to put in place a cooling system for the NICMOS detector, which is a detector in the Hubble that can see radiation that comes from stars in the near infrared wavelength. And as most of you know, at least that generation of infrared detectors needed to be cooled down to very low temperatures before they could have the desired sensitivity. So this fifth spacewalk on my mission was to install actually a radiator on the outside of the telescope so it could cool this detector down and we could do good science with it.
And so you have a pretty great story about the fact that Hubble means a lot to you. It was something that kind of inspired you before you even became an astronaut. So could you tell us a little bit about that story and what Hubble means to you?
Well, Ron, I guess you could say that Hubble and I go way back. When I was going through Air Force pilot training back in I guess this was early 1983, I told you I was a science fiction reader, avid science fiction reader, and I was reading a science fiction magazine. In fact, I still have a subscription. It's Analog magazine, and my wife and I went on I was in pilot training, but my wife and I decided to spend a weekend at Big Bend National Park there in western Texas. I was going to pilot training in Texas, and we jumped on the motorcycle and headed out to Big Bend for a couple days of camping. Now, those in the audience that are astronomers and people that are interested in viewing the stars and stuff like that, maybe backyard telescopes and stuff like that, they know that West Texas is renowned for having some of the darkest skies you're going to find in the continental United States, if not the darkest skies. And so we were camping that night, and it was kind of cold, and Cheryl had fallen asleep. And I was reading my little science fiction magazine, and there was an article in there about, this was back in 1983, there was an article in there about the fact that NASA was developing a space telescope, a telescope that was going to be built on the ground and then launched into space, and then they'd be able to get real good observations of the stars and galaxies and stuff like that. And I remember somehow, Ron, this idea really connected with me. It was like, man, that's cool, a space telescope. And I was laying there waiting to fall asleep, and I crawled outside the tent, and it was kind of cold outside. I was just wearing my underwear, but I looked up at the sky, and there it was. The Milky Way was out, and you could see the stars. And like I say, the skies are extremely dark out there. And it just hit me. I said, I'm just a dinky little second lieutenant going through pilot training in the Air Force. But if I was ever given the opportunity, I want to be on that space team. I want to be there helping mankind do these types of wonderful endeavors and to explore the universe. I mean, and I said to myself, I would go to NASA and I would sweep floors in order to be part of that team. And I like to tell people, sometimes in math, sometimes in public, my math gets a little bit screwed up. But I like to tell people that 19 years, almost to the day, after that incident in the campground, Ron, I woke up one morning and I turned my head to the left, and there was the Hubble Space Telescope in the back of my spaceship.
That's got to be a pretty incredible feeling. And I don't know that there's, I mean, do you know of any other astronauts that it inspired in that way that really kind of, were such a big inspiration, and then they got to, just fly the shuttle to space and maybe help it out along a little bit.
If Ron, if I had to hazard a guess, there was a guy I flew on my mission with. He's actually been on 3 Hubble servicing missions. His name is John Grunsfeld, and he is an astronomer by training, a PhD. And
I've heard of him.
He probably was inspired by the Hubble before he got into the space program, I'm guessing, because he is everything Hubble. He's the Hubble's biggest fan. So I would, in answer to your question, perhaps there's 1 or 2 other astronauts out there. Now, the inspiration from Hubble didn't end there. I did manage to graduate from Air Force pilot training, and I went on to be a fighter pilot in the United States Air Force. And it was an exciting, great job. It was everything I thought it would be. And later on in my career, because of my education as an engineer, I got an opportunity to be an Air Force test pilot. And I can remember I was just starting out my test pilot career, and I was looking at I was home one night looking at a National Geographic magazine, and I was flipping through, and Ron, there was a picture in there, a full-page picture of the Hubble Deep Field View that had been taken by the Hubble after the optics got fixed and everything, and it started to be able to do really good science. And what this was it was a long duration photograph taken of a very small sector of space. And by long duration, I mean on the order of like 10 days.
A quarter.
Right. With these super powerful cameras that they've got. And when the picture came back down to Earth, after all the data were compiled, I think the scientists were astounded to find a couple thousand galaxies in that little tiny piece of sky, no bigger than the piece of sky that would be obscured by a breadcrumb, were you to go out tonight and hold a breadcrumb between your thumb and forefinger at arm's length, and then move that breadcrumb and imagine you're peering at the tiny piece of sky that was obscured by that breadcrumb. There were 2,000 galaxies in that image. And I remember looking at that, and by that time I was a test pilot. And I was getting to the point where I soon would be eligible to apply to be an astronaut. And that deep field view, there's been different ones that have come out, the ultra deep field view and the extreme deep field view. There's been other ones that have come out, but it was that first one, Ron, and I got to tell you, I'm confessing all my space geek habits here.
I think you're the perfect person, man. I am too.
Because I know that you're not judging me.
No, I'm not. How can I? I got space on my shirt. I got space in the background.
But Ron, when I was working at NASA, even before I'd ever been, chosen to go on the Hubble mission, when I was working at NASA, on the corkboard up by my desk, I had thumbtacked to the corkboard the Hubble Deep Field View, and I had taken a little Sharpie and I drew a little arrow to one of the little dots on the picture, probably some obscure galaxy or something like that, and I wrote, "This is the goal."
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Well, and there's something else that's kind of cool about today, and actually what you have on. So you gotta tell that story. The very awesome T-shirt looks like there. it's gonna move. Other side. There you go. Wait for it. Wait for it. There you go.
You can tell I don't do this very often. You guys see that?
Yep.
This is one of the,
baby.
this is one of the crew shirts that we wore when we were in space, back in the day, back during shuttle missions. Crews got to pick their own shirts, and then they'd send away to Land's End and get these shirts made and everything, and he brought them to space. But I still got one of them here. Ron, I bet you'd like this shirt, bro.
It just flew to space on the mission that helped Hubble keep going. No big deal. So I couldn't fit it in any way. So it had to have to put it in something and hang it on the wall. So today is a big day. It's the 30th anniversary, and obviously Hubble's meant a lot. So looking back, is there really you talked about Hubble Deep Field, But overall, what do you think that this has really meant for humanity, what we've learned from this incredible mission that has meant so much to so many?
Well, I mean, there's the inspiration. There's actually the aesthetic beauty of the images that the Hubble produces. Now, there are several telescopes over the years that have been in space, and perhaps there's even more up there now. I can't remember or not, but they tend to look at different sections of the of the electromagnetic spectrum. In other words, there's been X-ray satellites, and there's been gamma ray observatories, and there's been infrared satellites. But really, the Hubble is the premier space telescope that views the universe in the same wavelength that our eyes can see. You know, of the entire electromagnetic spectrum, there's only a small sliver of it that your eyes can actually detect. There's all kinds of stuff out there happening in our world that we can't see with our eyes. There's only a small amount of radiation that we can actually detect with our eyes, but the Hubble looks at the universe in the visible wavelength. And I think, Ron, that's one reason why we find the images to be so beautiful. You can get online and look at X-ray, quote unquote, X-ray images and gamma ray images and infrared images, and they mean a lot to scientists, you know, but to gomers like us here on Earth, and we're not professional astronomers or anything like that, they're just not as beautiful as the Hubble images are. And that's one reason Hubble is so special to us, because of the beautiful images that she sends down to us Earthlings. But in terms of the science that Hubble has produced over the years, you know, Ron, I flew STS-109 back in 2002. At that point, Hubble had been airborne for about 12 years. And of course, she's been up there now for another 18 years after that. So when I went up, it wasn't even halfway through the lifetime that Hubble has now. So we were getting ready to fly, and we were out there in Washington, D.C. at Goddard Space Flight Center. Goddard is where NASA has the control facilities and all the bureaucratic positions and stuff that support the Hubble. Goddard's kind of in charge of the Hubble among the NASA centers. So we were out there at Goddard, and this is like a cocktail party or something like that. And I remember this astronomer was standing next to me, and she's all of about 5 foot tall. She was Italian, apparently very famous astronomer, but I'm just a dumb pilot, so I'd never heard of her or nothing like that. But we're talking and everything, and she goes, "Digger," she says, "You guys, have you had a good training flow?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am. We've been training, and we feel really confident we're going to do a good job." She takes a sip of her wine, and she comes back down, and she says, "You going to be careful around the telescope?" "Oh, yes, ma'am. We're going to be really careful. We've been training for 9 months to do this." And she said, "Digger, I just want you to know that over half of everything we know about our universe comes from the Hubble Space Telescope."
No pressure.
Now I was holding on to my beer, and my hands started to shake. I mean, think about it. There's people in the audience that are my age. Okay, I'm fixing to be 63 years old. I can remember learning about astronomy and reading the books. And when I went through college, had an astronomy course back there in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s. All that knowledge, all the knowledge that Galileo developed about our universe, all the famous early astronomers that discovered the planets and all that kind of stuff, and all the smart people that had looked at the universe before that, the Hubble dwarfs the amount of knowledge that mankind was able to gather for hundreds and hundreds of years just with that one instrument. It's just astounding, the superlatives, the scientific superlatives that the Hubble is responsible for. That list is absolutely astounding. I encourage folks to, after this event, maybe to get online and see how incredible the science is that's been coming out of the Hubble.
It really is mind blowing, and I don't know that there's too many people that haven't seen those images now, thank you, social media. Thank you for the internet, because you would be able to find them before, but now it's just go to the website, just type it up. And there's plenty of stuff out there. All you have to do is go to any of NASA's websites today, and it's all over. It really is it's the talk of the town today. And for what you did then, like you helped us continue this amazing mission that's changed so many lives, inspired so many people, just like it inspired you. And you do continue to inspire as well. Like, we're really fortunate that you work with us at the Space Foundation, with the education team. And so you do something that's really cool. That's something similar to this, but instead of getting, kind of going out to everyone, it goes out to the school students around the world where you inspire. So can you tell us a little bit about Audience with an Astronaut, which I know that you just recently did for our new virtual auxiliary program that we're doing right now?
Yeah, Ron, thanks for mentioning that. Now, my wife Cheryl and I, after I left the Air Force and in NASA in 2005, we decided to move to Colorado Springs, because we're motorcycle people and we like the weather here. And of course, the mountains are 15 minutes from my driveway, and you're on mountain roads. I mean, it's a wonderful place to go if you ride motorcycles. Better than Minnesota, which is where I grew up. But anyways, so unbeknownst to us, well, I guess we knew that Space Foundation was here. And then Cheryl and I actually started, shortly after we got here to Colorado Springs, we started our little business, 180 Out Incorporated. And what we do is we travel around the country and around the world, really, to schools and talk to kids, basically getting them inspired to stay awake during those math and science classes, so that in the future, when they get to the point where they're choosing a career, they actually have the option to go into technical fields. I mean, not every kid wants to go into technical fields, but what you don't want, Ron, is to have that door closed, and then it's too late. If you change your mind and you decide you want to be a rocket scientist, but you've never cracked open a math book, and you're in college, it's probably too late. So we inspire kids at the K through 12 level to work hard in those technical classes, so that those doors remain open to them as they go through life, whether it to get a technical education or an education at college. Ron, I'd say for every rocket scientist that NASA has, there's literally hundreds and hundreds of people that build the Hubbles, and they build the rockets, and they put things together, and they work with their hands, and they weld, and they rivet, and they apply foam, and they paint, and they form exotic metals to make these incredible machines from, and do the electronics. And a lot of them don't even have college degrees, but they've got great technical educations, and they're in love with the whole idea of space exploration. So to me, there's nothing more tragic than a young lady or a young man reaching his or her early 20s and deciding that space or high tech or aerospace is what I want to do, and they don't have the toolkit. But in our schools, in our K through 12 schools, every kid, should he or she desire, can give themselves the tools so that they can be a player, and they have actually the option to go into these types of fields. And that's what we do. So after several years of being here in Colorado Springs, we were I guess just fate brought us and the Space Foundation together. There was an astronaut friend of mine that was working with you guys, and he had to change his plans, and they found out we were in town. Space Foundation found out we were in town, and they called us up, and we worked with Ron. We worked with some of your teachers. I think that first trip was to Los Angeles, and I said to Cheryl, I said, this is wonderful. These folks are totally on board with the vision that we've had for the last 10 years working with kids. You guys are doing the same thing, except you've got really smart teachers, and you've got what we didn't have. You've got hands-on activities when you go out for these field trips to different schools and stuff like that. And the Discovery Center itself here in Colorado Springs, which is basically a space that kids of all ages really can go to and just be immersed in hands-on activities and learning about space, the space environment, space suits, spaceships, everything space. And Ron, I think that you probably got hired there after Cheryl and I started working there, but you love the Discovery Center as much as anybody when you're out there running around on the floor. I know you do.
Oh, absolutely. I'm grinning ear to ear. I did, if I remember correctly, I think I still hold the record for the fastest to 100 hours volunteering, and I did it in like 3 weeks. And so I fell in love with the place. I mean, when I walked in, it informed my decision to decide to move here. And so it's difficult for me to say that there's a bigger fan of it than me. But one of the best parts about that I really love about our museum or the Discovery Center and all of them really is whenever you go to these places, there's this inspiration that you see in kids. I'm a device guy. I'm obviously online a whole lot. It's kind of my job. But you see kids running around that museum, grinning ear to ear. In the middle of it, we're all born scientists, and they're so interested and engaged by what they see there, and it's one of the best parts of it. And it's great to have somebody like you. I mean, one day you were doing an AWA, and it was museum selfie day, and
so I remember that.
Yep. It was, we were doing that interview, and you're like, yeah, sure, I'll join. And then you ended up staying for like an extra hour, just sitting and talking to everybody. You're like, I want to meet everybody. Like, I want to meet everybody that works here and all this stuff. And then everybody just kind of crowded around you, just started asking you questions. So I think the morning was only supposed to be, you were only supposed to be there in the morning. I think you left at like 2.
Well, Ron, you know that group of volunteers that you guys have down at the Discovery Center. I mean, these are all folks that have jobs, they work for a living, 40, 50 hours a week. And with all the extra time they got, they choose to go down there and volunteer because they love being around the kids when the kids are learning stuff like that. And they love being involved in the space program. Ron, you're actually as involved in the space program as I ever was. This is one big quest to get humanity out to the solar system. You know, that all that cool stuff in the solar system wouldn't be there, and we wouldn't have the ability to explore these places if it wasn't our destiny, if it wasn't just meant to happen. But destiny isn't one of those things that you sit there and you wait for it to unfold. It takes hard work, it takes sacrifice. Sometimes terrible things happen, but we keep pressing forward. And those of us that are involved in the space program, I know that the United States has been through a couple of tough weeks, but those of us that are involved in the space program, as we are, we have unbounded optimism, and we know things are going to get better, and we know that there are great things ahead of us, of mankind, if we continue to work hard and challenge ourselves and come up with great new ideas to conquer all these problems we have to conquer in order to make these dreams come true.
And I think those are wonderful words, and it brings to mind something that a whole lot of people may not know. You hear that someone's an astronaut, and you automatically assume a lot of things about them, but you did not have the traditional childhood growing up. You did not have the traditional schooling growing up, and because of that, you're an inspiration to a whole lot more people than Astronauts are already inspirational, but let's add that to it. There's a lot of people that stand out in the astronaut corps that have just are so intelligent and amazing, but they went through different battles, and you're one of those. So can you tell us a little bit about that story, and then also, your words of wisdom to people that kind of want to follow in your footsteps of saying, you know what, I didn't come from a traditional background either, but if this guy did it, I can do it.
Well, I mean, just to put it in a nutshell, I was, my mom had me when she was 16 years old, and she had an 8th grade education. She was going to a Catholic high school, and the fact that she got pregnant didn't go over real well, so boom, she's kicked out of school. She's got an 8th grade education, and by the time my mom was 21 years old, she was a single parent because my dad got cold feet and ran off. She had a single parent, 3 kids, 8th grade education, and we're living in the housing projects in St. Paul, Minnesota. And because she was working full-time as a hairdresser, we were being taken care of by babysitters, and there wasn't a whole lot of supervision. So Ron, I just decided I didn't like school as a 1st grader, and I just decided that I wasn't going to go. And I used to skip out of school a lot and get in a lot of trouble, and actually failed 8th grade. My mom got married again when I was in 5th grade, and the guy's a great guy and everything. My stepdad's still alive. He's the one that got me started on motorcycles. But he was working real hard to support those kids, and he wasn't home a lot. And I failed 8th grade. Of all things, it was science class that I failed. But time went on, and like I say, I'd been reading science fiction. And when I was in high school, I finally decided I knew I was never going to go to college. You know, we were a blue-collar family. I knew I was never going to go to college, but I was afraid I might change my mind someday. So I did take some math classes and some science classes. But what I really wanted to do after I was done with high school was to jump on that motorcycle that I'd saved up for by working 40 hours a week when I was in high school. You know, when I should have been studying, I was at work, and when I was at school, that's when I got my sleep. But I went off to see the world on my motorcycle and ran out of money, of course, so I started jumping trains and those kinds of things, to travel around and working odd jobs. But after about 2.5 years of that, a couple things happened. I met Cheryl, fell in love, started growing up a little bit, and decided it might be cool to be a fighter pilot. And of course, to do that, you got to go to college. Now, when I share that story with kids, the whole moral of the story is, you know, you're sitting there, particularly people we're talking to this afternoon that are middle school or high school. You're sitting there and you might have a pretty good idea about what it is that you want to do with your life or the type of career you'd like to have. I'm here to tell you that you're probably going to change your mind. And the best thing a kid can do going through a K through 12 experience, the best thing a kid can do is to get themselves prepared for the stuff that's going to be the hardest to qualify for. In other words, if you're absolutely certain that you're not going to go to college, that you're going to be a tradesman, or you're going to be an entertainer or musician or something like that, yeah, there's a 1% chance you might change your mind and decide you want to be a doctor or a lawyer or a rocket scientist. And you got to keep that 1% possibility open by taking the classes in high school and in middle school that are going to leave those options open for you. Because as I discovered when I did go to college, I was horribly unprepared for engineering school. And Ron, I had to pedal 3 times as hard as anybody else did in order to get my college degree. But then after that, I went off to Air Force pilot training, and then my story becomes quite conventional. But the moral of the story is, K through 12 out there, prepare yourself for every eventuality, because you have no idea where your life is going to take you. And Ron, I don't know if you want to get into your story, but you and I have talked about your story, and it also is very inspiring. And listening to your story gives me an idea why when I go to the Discovery Center, you're like the happiest person we ever see.
I mean, it is. I love doing what I get to do. And, you know, at one point I really did love space and science. I really love science. And I never thought that I would get into what I'm into now. And, you know, I stepped away from that. You know, being a DJ for so long was a really, really amazing career to have. It was super fun, but I'm having way more fun doing what I get to do now. Like, I get to talk to, you know, people like you and Neil deGrasse Tyson and all these incredible people, right? And it's this amazing thing to think of, that space is really for everyone. And that's an important thing to remember. And that another part of it is that, you know, failure can happen. Failure does happen. And it can absolutely be an option, and it should be an option. You're probably not pressing yourself enough if you don't fail at something. Very few people get through life and excel without failing at some things. And, you know, even for me, even going back to school, getting my GED, going to college for the first time, it was tough with a full-time job, being, you know, in my mid-30s, in college for the first time in my life, full-time job, trying to run a business, trying to figure out what I was going to do with the rest of my life. You know what? College algebra just started to fall away when I had to pay the bills a little bit. So when I didn't get the grade I wanted, I went back that summer, and then, you know, then I killed it. So remember that there's always those remembering that there's always that second chance, that there's always the ability to do more is important. And you are just a fascinating and fantastic example of that. So we love having you on, Digger. You're always amazing. Can you please tell people where they can find you on the internet, so that way they can find out more about what you're up to?
You can get on I guess the best place to start is get on our website, astronautbiker.com. It's all one word. That's astronautbiker.com. There's links on there to get to our Facebook page, and we got an Instagram. My wife is a social media person. And between Facebook and Instagram, Cheryl does a really good job keeping our followers up to date and up to speed on what we're doing. That the website tends to get a little bit stale at times, but Facebook and Instagram, there's a lot of action on there. So I encourage folks to get on there and see what we're about and what we're really about. I mean, the whole core of our mission is to enable young people to fulfill their dreams, no matter what those dreams are. And they may not be space related, but the same rules apply. The rules to achieve success are the same, whether you want to be a rocket scientist or whether you want to be a teacher or you want to be a dancer. The rules are the same. They involve a lot of hard work. They involve going after your goals and having the ability to set goals and follow them through, and good old-fashioned hard work and loving what you do. And that's what we're after. We want to, Cheryl and I, when we go to schools, we want to enable all young people to have a full choice of opportunities after they're through with their K through 12 experience, a full choice of opportunities so that there are no doors that are closed.
Sorry, I was sneezing. Thank you so much, Digger, for coming on today and talking with us. I can't wait until the Discovery Center's back open, and I know you're doing so much with us. Thank you for joining us virtually today and all the stuff you've been doing with us for AWA and Auxilia and all these programs that we're getting to do. It's always awesome to have you on and always fun to talk with you. I always learn something new.
Thanks a lot, Ron. Good luck.
I'll try we'll see. I don't even know what that means, honestly. There's just so much going on right now. But thank you, everybody, for joining us today. This is going to conclude the special episode of the live edition of Space Foundation Space4U podcast. Keep your eyes and ears open for more Space4U episodes by checking out our social media outlets on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And, of course, our website at www.spacefoundation.org. And, of course, we have all of our Auxilia education resources that are available on our website at www.discoverspace.org. And on all of those outlets and more, it's our goal to inspire, educate, connect, and advocate for the space community. Because at the Space Foundation, we will always have space for you. Thank you so much for joining tonight.